You know how to hold it all together, but when it comes to your relationships, something's always missing. Welcome to Emotionally Wealthy, a podcast for high achievers who are ready to trade emotional disconnection for clarity, fulfillment, and relationships that are nourishing, not draining. I'm your host, Karen Conlon, licensed therapist, transformational coach, and your guide in turning insight into action. Are you ready for it? Let's do this. Welcome, everyone, to Emotionally Wealthy. If you or someone that you care about has ever received a serious diagnosis that gradually became a part of your identity, well, today's episode will deeply resonate with you because we're going to explore what happens when a diagnosis becomes the first thing that people see and also sometimes the only future that you can imagine. But we're also going to learn about the incredible changes and resilience that you're capable of if you allow hope to come into your life, even if that hope comes with struggles and setbacks and uncertainty. My guest today is Dr. Erika Horwitz. And Dr. Horwitz believes that while a diagnosis can explain a part of a person's experience, it does not have to define the rest of their lives. Dr. Horwitz is an award-winning psychologist, mindfulness teacher, a keynote speaker, and the co-author of Improbable and Extraordinary, a transformation of mental illness and addiction, which I am so excited to talk to you about today with Dr. Horwitz. For more than 30 years, she has helped people move out of reactive autopilot and move towards greater self-awareness, choice, resilience, and authenticity. This conversation is about looking beyond a diagnosis, letting go of the shame without abandoning responsibility, and understanding why and how change may still be possible, even when hope feels very far away. Dr. Erika Horwitz, welcome to Emotionally Wealthy. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me. Very grateful you invited me to have a chat today.
Today's chat is so relevant in so many ways. It is one of the topics that I feel deserves and needs more attention because there are so many people struggling, not just in this country, but all over the world with mental illness. And I say mental illness specifically because the physical illnesses, they get diagnosed. Some of them don't get diagnosed as easily, but with the mental illness, it's hard. It's hard because a lot of times we don't have the blood work or the lab work that tells us in black or white, this is what you have. And so I'm so excited to have this conversation today. But before we talk about the book that you co-authored with your brother, Saul, I want to ask you about you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself before you became the psychologist and the author and the speaker that we know today. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the early childhood messages or experiences that shaped how you showed up in relationships before you came into self-awareness?
Of course. I was born in Mexico and my parents were married for about 7 years. I have two older brothers, Saul being one of them. And, in those very patriarchal cultures where the man runs the show, for whatever reason, my father wanted to get divorced. My mom didn't want the divorce. So he kidnapped my brothers and I, literally. My mom went out for the day or for an errand or something, and he just grabbed my brothers and I and took us. And he said to her, either you sign those papers, those divorce papers, or you won't see them again.
My goodness.
And I was 3.5. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse. I think it's a blessing. I have quite amazing memory. It was only 3.5, but I can tell you where we were, the house, the fig tree, the nannies, the ladies that worked there, my auntie who owned the house, whatever. And so for 3 months, we were away from her while they sorted out the paperwork.
Wow.
And then we were returned to her, but she was too depressed from the divorce. And I have a memory where she was playing this song. I can still sing it, actually. It's only 3.5. But the song translates to hopeless hope is what the song was about. Esperanza. And she would play the song, you know, the old record prayers where you and
Oh
would lie on the
gosh.
couch and cry. And I was sitting on the floor as she's on the couch crying with her tissue in her hand, and the song would be over. She'd get up, play it again, and cry in her. So it was my exposure to what abandonment does to people,
Yeah.
right? To see that my father had left her. But then she was so depressed. And I guess at the time you saw psychiatrists for counseling,
Yeah.
for therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the psychiatrist said to her, you need to go away. You can't be around this man. So my parents decided that she go away, literally go away, like to New York with her auntie who lived there. But I guess they felt that if they sat us down to tell us that she was going to go away, we would be too upset. So she just went for lunch and I didn't see her for 2 years.
Oh.
My dad came and took us. He was remarried by this time to a 19-year-old. My dad was 35 or 36 and this one was 19. And so then I was taken from her for 2 years, right? So those are the reality for a little kid that experienced so much separation and abandonment. And those 2 years that we lived with our father and his wife, who was lovely, my stepmom I adore her, were very difficult. My dad was an alcoholic. He was abusive. He used to beat up my brother,
Hmm.
who always got it the worst. The one that Saul that I wrote the book with, they were horrible. So not only was my mom gone, she left us in a situation where my dad was just not, my dad was a person that was hard to explain because he had some amazing, generous, kind, loving side, and then he had a pretty monstrous side, right?
Yeah.
So that was the start to my life. And so how did that affect relationships? Talk about human differences. For some reason, I didn't lose my ability to be loving and to connect. I don't have an anxious attachment style, which is surprising, but I do have an obsession with not abandoning. So that's my first marriage. It took me a long time to leave because I didn't want to abandon him. And then I have 2 daughters, and my parenting has been quite impacted by my fear that they would ever feel abandoned, which made me overdo it.
Right.
Right?
Right. I am really appreciative of you being so open and candid about your experience, because I think that when we, as people who are in the mental health profession, are in this space and we're helping others and we're working with others, a lot of times, and this isn't even my my view. I mean, I've had clients actually tell me, well, you must not know what this is like, because I think it looks to me like you have it all figured out. And I think that there's this perception that because we are in the healing profession, that we have it all figured out. So I really very grateful for you to be so honest and open about that, because this is the type of, I think, normalizing that people need to have and to hear, especially from people who are in the mental health field. With your experience with abandonment and having that very early understanding that, or idea rather, that when abandonment happens, it happens quickly, it happens abruptly. I'm wondering, how did you start making changes? Because one of the things about child development and attachment is that usually when you develop what we call secure attachment, there's usually one adult that was maybe the buffer, or maybe the one that was able to hold the space for you, to let you know that you're okay. Did you have that person? First of all, that's, I guess, the first question that I want to ask. Was there a person in your life that gave you some of that?
Well, we need to also know that, I was in 60s and 70s. People didn't talk feelings or, blah, blah, blah. So not that I would have gone to express the upset of what was happening, but I have done a lot of therapy. I had this erroneous belief that there was no one to take care of me in various parts of my life because my mom left me.
Yeah.
But in the healing process, I realized that I've been blessed. There's always been somebody. So when we were kidnapped that time to my dad's brother's in-laws, it was the grandma and the grandpa and a few other kids who lived there. And the kids were, I guess, late teens, early 20s. And they were very loving to us. So I wasn't away from loving people. And then my stepmom, who was only 19 to 21 or so when we lived with her. And she was 100% a mom to us when my dad was hard to rely on. And then I came back to my mom 2 years later, and my mom was outstandingly loving and caring. And so you're right, I did have loving presence along the way. And my two brothers, we were lucky to be the siblings that do gel together and connect. And so we would have these talks in my bedroom, and stuff was happening in the family. We would have these meetings and talk about it. And so I've always had someone who was there. And then the therapy was really, and I still go to therapy today. I don't mind telling anybody that when you've had early childhood trauma, you do a lot of work on it. But as you go along in life, there's things that trigger the old trauma, even though
Yes.
you've done a lot of healing. And so I go back, right? And maybe there's a different angle or a different aspect of those early experiences that can still show themselves, even though in therapy. Yeah.
I heard a saying a long time ago. I don't remember who it was from, but it always stuck to me. And I always would use it with patients when I was explaining trauma work. It's like squeezing a lemon, right? When you squeeze a lemon, you squeeze it and then sometimes you turn it a little bit because maybe there's a little bit more juice. And just when you think, okay, I don't think there's anything else, you might turn it a little bit more and give it another squeeze, and maybe there's another drop or two coming.
Yes.
Right. That's what this healing work is about. And the trauma work that we work through, it is kind of like squeezing that lemon, that just when you think there might still a little bit more. Eric, I wanted to ask you within that same vein also, what would you say in your personal experience made it possible to even think that after so much pain and survival, that change was possible? Was it working with a therapist? Was it, finding the right partner? Was it a combination of things? What would you say are maybe the one thing or the things that helped you to start seeing, wait, it is possible. It is possible to change things around for myself mentally, emotionally, psychologically.
Well, the first time I went to a serious therapy, I went because I was curious, because according to me, I was fine. So 20, how old would I have been? 26 or so. And according to me, I was fine.
Yeah.
I didn't even think that what happened to me as a kid was traumatic. Honestly, I was in complete denial because I'm a tiger in Winnie the Pooh. I'm the optimist, right? And so I went to this one session because, the husband I was married to at the time had gone and said, "Oh, wow, this is amazing. You have to go." And in that one session, this therapist did this intervention or strategy where you do all this breathing. And it's like she was able to reach my unconscious because I was not aware. And it came out in that session that I was quite upset with my mom. I had no awareness that I was upset with my mom at 26. According to me, my mom and I were old then. And then I was also born, no one's fault, but I was born with a lot of physical problems. Like I had club feet, so my feet were completely turned. I had a cleft palate, which is like the cleft lip, but just in the palate, so a little hole there. And I had my jaw that was sticking out. So I spent my childhood in doctors.
Yeah.
Doctors. And so you feel like you're somewhat defective because, your brothers don't have to go to so many doctors, right? And so in that session, just with this breathing that she did, I got in touch with the trauma of my birth problems. And then I was angry at my mom. I cried for like 2 months because I had no idea that I was so upset with her. And funny enough, she babysat my daughter, who was about 3 at the time. And so when I came to pick her up, my mom said, "So how did it go? What? Did you find out you're angry at me?" Oh my God, my mom was so sad. And I said, no, I never went back to harass her about anything. I took responsibility for my own healing. So after that session, when I discovered that, oh my God, I got stuff buried in there. And I was in my undergraduate, in my psychology degree, which, I'm just fascinated by psychology. So it was an interest of psychology and also discovering that someone was there. No, I think one of the things we do in therapy is we instill hope when people first meet us, right? They start believing that we can help them. And this therapist really made me feel that. So then I dove in. And that for me, doing this work is, I just know that it can be done because it happened to me.
Yeah.
I never claimed I'm healed, but I went from having low self-esteem and insecurity and all that buried stuff to really seeing it and being able to see that I could. In fact, the guy I'm married to now, I met him when I was 11. He's my brother's best friend. So he's my second husband. So we were very close friends. I moved to Canada. We kept being very good friends. And he was always at my house growing up. So
Mm-hmm.
he saw me in vivo, right? Like he knew the kind of kid I was or whatever. And then years later, after doing therapy, and I went to Mexico for a visit, and we spent a lot of time chatting and spending time. He wrote me a letter that I still have that said he couldn't believe that he said that you've changed 1,000%, right? So therapy really helped me be better and, and really learning to love myself. People come to us in dire pain and we see this amazing ability of human beings to transform. So
Yeah.
that's my passion.
Yeah. And it never ceases to amaze me. And just when you think, yeah, no, I've seen this before. Nope. No, you haven't. So having the humility in this work to know that what you don't know, to know what you don't know, I should say, right?
Absolutely.
Is such an important thing. You mentioned your brother, Saul. We need to dive into this book because man, it is something else. There were parts that were hard to read just because it was so raw and honest. And I found myself even thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if I could say these things out loud. I don't know if I could write these things out loud if it was, if it was me writing this book. So in your book that you co-wrote, you and your brother Saul, called Improbable and Extraordinary, it tells the story of your brother Saul's life with bipolar disorder, addiction, anxiety, depression, and all of the really profound emotional suffering. One of the things that has really struck me about this story is this insight you gave about being kidnapped. Well, you were 3.5, he was 6 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the alcoholism and the physical abuse and probably verbal abuse, I don't want to assume, but kind of goes hand in hand typically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to ask you, what was it that made you feel like his story needed to be told?
Well, what's unique about us telling the story is that I am a witness to it, right? So
Yeah.
not only did I live with him as kids, but I witnessed he was a full of life, curious, loving, great older brother, leader of the three of us. And then when he turned around 12, 13, we started seeing the change, right? More isolated, more reactive. He would have these rages where he would go into his room and just throw things all over the place and have a hard time going to school. He now explains he was just terrified, had terrible anxiety to leave the house, right? At the time, he just looked lazy.
Sure.
My parents that didn't know. My poor mother tried to wake him up, whatever. Anyway, so over the years, he just it wasn't just bipolar where he had the mania, right? Where extreme euphoria or highs and depressions. It's bipolar presents, with people who can't stop talking. They talk too fast. They say irresponsible things. They tend to be impulsive. They have grandiosity. So he was better than everybody else. And so by the time he was in his 30s, it was very hard to be around him. You couldn't get a word in. He was aggressive with his words, inappropriate with things he used to say. So it wasn't just the highs and lows, like his whole personality was just a mess.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to about 15 years ago, 12 years ago or something, I have a daughter who got married and moved to Mexico. She married a Mexican person and moved to the town where my brother now lives. So I started going much more frequently. And I honestly, I could not. His transformation was forget talking the talk. I mean, it's just able to listen, full of wisdom. He's always been a kind, empathic soul, but he was so in himself that he couldn't demonstrate that. He has such an amazing awareness. I think that's his superpower.
Mm-hmm.
He has the awareness when the biology wants to go down to depression, and he knows what to do not to push it down. He starts being manic. His mania tends to be irritability at times or wanting to spend money.
Yeah.
And he's able to notice this is where I'm at and he knows what to do. So he's been able to contain the highs and the lows, but also to learn to listen, to be helpful, to not go with, he says he doesn't listen to his head. So when I started witnessing this over those visits, I said to him, you got to tell the story.
Yeah.
Oh, are you sure? I said, no. And he loves writing, but because of his bipolar disorder, he'll start a project and not finish it.
Yeah.
It's one of his Achilles heels. And so I said, well, we'll just do it. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was 1 year where he stopped writing and I happened to go visit and he doesn't remember what I said. I don't remember what I said or what we said, but he got going again, was able to write it. But to me, it's a true, very unusual story of recovery. And he didn't take medication. Most people with bipolar disorder take medication. He tried it, didn't like how it felt. And I'm not promoting people not take medication. Of course, if medication is helpful, people should. In his case, he didn't. So he transformed a very biological disorder, right, with all the other self-esteem issues and things that he had picked up along the way with life experience and just transformed it. And so that's how, for both of us, for me, it's honoring his incredible transformation, is doing, making sure this book went out. And for him, it's, well, first of all, because I convinced him. And second of all, because he hopes that it'll instill hope in other people.
This is the type of conversation that needs to happen so that people understand that, as well, with bipolar disorder specifically, it's not in a silo and there's not just one way of doing things. Like you said, there are people that the medication is what they need and what helps. I tend to think that there's a combination of things, right? It's not just the one thing. And so that's what we're going to be discussing, because I agree. The transformation that your brother made, especially without medication, because it is a much more difficult thing to manage bipolar disorder without medication. The cycles, euphoria, abandon, depression, euphoria, abandon, depression, right? During the euphoria stage, we're getting into things. We are thinking there's nothing we can't do. We are starting projects. We have amazing ideas. And then comes the point of abandon, right? Where it starts looking like it's too much. It's overwhelming. We can't do this. And we start abandoning things, which then leads to this depression. With all these things that you're watching, these cycles going back and forth, up and down. As the family watched, was there a thought or suspicion that there was something else? Because bipolar, usually comes later. You don't get that diagnosis until later, and a lot of things have happened. Were there other diagnoses that he was labeled before that, or any other thoughts that doctors had or family?
No, bear in mind that in the 60s and 70s, it was a very Freudian way of thinking, right? It must have been the divorce. So must have been the divorce. And, I think one psychiatrist, when he was quite young, I don't know if elementary or early high school, but that he was a problem child, whatever that meant. And so he walked around believing he was a problem child. And, also when you think of family systems, right? Like once a family assigns the role of the black sheep to you, or the problem, then that, so guess what? My middle brother then was the hero.
Yes.
Right? He was the straight A student, wanted to play guitar at the age of 10. Oh, he's musical. Oh, wants to do karate. Oh, he has a black belt by the time he's 17.
Yeah.
So, you have one that is the problem and the other one who is the hero, the shining star. And then there was me, the little sister who was neither here nor there for either, right?
Yeah.
So he was undiagnosed till his 40s.
Wow.
Right? So we knew he had some depression. He was difficult, but not really. He did see some psychiatrists or whatever, but what he says is that he's very intelligent. And people, this is what he says, they get very good at manipulation to get what they need or what they want. So he knew what to say and how to say it. So, that nobody was able to really catch
Yeah.
what was wrong. But as a teenager, he would do the typical reduced need for sleep that bipolar people have. So he would stay up all night. Oh, and
Yeah.
he would create. He would create music that he couldn't play because he would
Wow.
study everything about music. And then he would create it and our piano teacher would come and play the piece. Or he wanted to paint. He does not have artistic. So he, in a closet door that was massive, he drew squares and then took a nude picture, like one of those fancy nude, and painted it by doing like stay up all night, poetry. Very good at writing poetry. He would write poetry, but he wouldn't stick with it. So
Yeah.
then my dad is, you're just lazy. You don't finish anything. So his self-esteem got ruined along the way because people didn't know there was a mental illness. All they saw was behaviors.
Yeah.
And my dad in particular used to label him a lot. And that ended up, between that and having a brother that was a shining star, his self-esteem got quite impacted as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that, when we don't have answers, human beings like answers. Human beings don't like to sit with uncertainty. It could be this or that, but we need to have something. And so you're saying back in the 60s and 70s, when it was very Freudian, very much focused on psychoanalysis and pathologizing. Yeah. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for your brother to have a lot of conversation or understanding from anyone, especially the people that he needed it from most, which was, but since we're talking about labels, what do you wish that people understood about the differences between, let's say, explaining someone's experience about what they're going through versus reducing them to a label? What do you wish more people knew about that?
Thank you for that question. One of my interests and passions is reducing stigma. Right. That's one of the reasons why we also wanted to put the book out. When I was I was the director of counseling services at a large university here in Canada. And I started this initiative to eliminate stigma. And so I got together with many other post-secondary settings and counselors in those settings. And we wrote a pledge that if you pledge it, then you're saying that your space is safe if you pledge to these things. And one of the things we had in there was that you were committing to not reducing people to their diagnoses.
Yeah.
Right. And the seeing that everybody has a gift, everybody has a purpose, everybody has a contribution to make. And so that to me is one of the issues in our society that, you get a diagnosis in the world, that's all they see.
Yeah.
And that's why mental illness is a closet, just like the LGBT closet, because people are not going to go to their workplace and say, I have bipolar disorder, even if they're functioning perfectly well.
Yeah.
Right? Because immediately people, that's all they see.
Yeah.
So we live in a world that is not speaking up. That's why I don't mind telling you my childhood story. I don't mind telling you that I've been put on antidepressants a couple of times. Well, one for menopause, which,
Oh, that's a whole nother episode. We can talk about that.
Right. And one, when I finished my PhD, I finished on a high. My professors gave me a gold medal. They nominated me for an award that I got from the Canadian Psychological Association. Brilliant. And I crashed. I had never had depression before. Clinical, I guess, from the stress of finishing that PhD, like clinical, where I was even afraid of opening an envelope of mail. Yeah. Extremely bad. And my doctor kept asking me questions. I went a couple of times and he says, well, I think you need medication. I said, okay, give me the medication. Yeah. So I don't mind sharing that because it's not an us and them. It's all of us. Some people have it more terrible, like my brother, whose brain was, bipolar disorder is a brain disorder. You're born with it. Luckily was not born with the predisposition, but given certain stress or loss or difficulty, your mental health can also be a mess. Yeah. So we need to have these conversations so people, first of all, recognize that there's nothing wrong with you if you're struggling. It's okay to ask for help. Yeah. And even if you get a diagnosis of generalized anxiety or whatever, that still does not define you. That's a small part of all of who you are.
Yeah, 100%. I want to look back at Saul's life now a little bit more with respect to his marriage, because he did end up finding a partner. He did get married. He had children. What was that like for him? What was that period in his life like for him? And also, what was the impact, would you say, on his family, on the children, as he cycled through this undiagnosed bipolar disorder and just doing his best that he could with the little bit that he had?
It was rough. It was rough. He talks about that in the book. My dad opened a business for him. Well, first, my dad hired him. My dad owned a chain of restaurants in Mexico. And the plan was that Saul would learn the business and then own one of those locations. He got fired soon after because he wasn't showing up on time. He was giving orders to the managers, right? Just a mental illness, right? And so then my dad helped him open a hamburger little restaurant, which was very famous because he's very, very good cook. But again, he had lows. He wouldn't show up, or he would, anyways, he had to close it down. So employment is a problem for people like him.
Yeah.
He would have a job for a while and then not. And so therefore, financially, his family struggled. The depressions, he would just lay in bed and watch TV for hours. So it did have an impact. Tells a story in the book that his daughter eventually was invited to this group. It was like a 12-step AA type group where he got help, where he actually got better. And she was invited to stand on the podium and tell him in front of all those people how hurt she was. But today she's very proud of him, and she's very close to him because she really appreciates that he made the effort to change.
Yeah.
Even though, of course, it would have had an impact to grow up with a parent like that. And he got married. He was only 21. I think it was an impulsive act. Just married, just wanted to, he talks a lot about, one of the symptoms of bipolar disorder is hypersexuality, where they just have this wanting to have sex. And so he thought, well, now I have somebody that I can have sex with all the time, his wife. But again, he talks about his distorted understanding of love.
Yeah.
Right? Because of between the trauma and his issues. And so all that was really affected him. Eventually, his wife and daughter asked him to move out. They just couldn't stand having him in the house anymore. So he was homeless for a short period of time. My other brother and I stepped in and started sending money to help him out. And so, eventually he reached that bottom, right? And that's when he started to try to transform.
Well, before that transformation, it was a big moment, because this was not something that happened little by little. Like, there was a moment where, like you said, he hit rock bottom.
So one day in his 40s, he just couldn't stand it anymore. Just people with these kinds of disorders, they have minds that won't stop, with negative thinking, with anxious thinking, with tragic thinking.
Yeah. Not
making it, not having proper employment, feeling like a failure. His family, obviously, I think he was still living at home at the time, but he just didn't want to live anymore, literally. And he talks about having several suicidal crises, like he calls them.
Yeah.
He had never attempted because he didn't want to do that to my mom. So my mom was a protective factor in his mind. But this day he said he didn't care about anything. He just was going to do it. So he was sitting in his car, getting the courage to drive the car to crash it. That was the way he was going to kill himself, so that my mom would think it was an accident. So he turns the car on, he's driving. And for some beautiful moment, he remembered, he had a thought that a friend about a year ago had said to him, Saul, why don't you come to this group? We can help you. At this point, he didn't have a substance abuse issue. He had had one early on, but even though it's a 12-step program, they help anybody with emotional problems, even if they're not addicts per se. So he's driving and he remembered his friend told him, and for some reason, it just gave him a tiny little bit of hope. He was determined to be done with life. He made a U-turn and drove to this group. He was so anxious and so unwell. He says he drove past it a couple of times. Finally, he found it, got off the car, went inside. The person greeting people at the door told him where his friend was sitting, the friend that had offered him to help him there. And he went and sat next to him. And he just surrendered. For somebody that has so much grandiosity, who didn't obey anybody, didn't trust anybody, thought he knew more than others, the pain was so excruciating, he was just willing to do whatever they told him to feel better. And that's where the transformation began.
Oh, my goodness. I had a thought about shame and how shame a lot of times keeps people, identified with their worst moments. And it sounds like there was just so much shame that he was living with, self awareness that needed to happen. I actually want to reframe that because I think there was actually a lot of self awareness, and that was part of the pain that he was feeling, but just not knowing how to change it. Because the type of self awareness that came later was a different type of self awareness. It came with understanding his body, understanding the biology of how his physiology responds to stress. So it was a different type of self awareness that came with feeling more agency and control. Whereas it sounds to me like the type of self awareness that he had previously was the type that came with hopelessness and helplessness. Like,
Yeah.
how difficult. I mean, just imagine, right? I'm just imagining, what is this like to live in this body and in this brain where it's like you are about to hit the wall, and you're going to hit the wall, and you don't want to hit the wall, but everything inside you is just pushing you to do that, and you don't
Mhm.
know how to make it stop.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, to us, it was a miracle that he had that thought and decided to go get help. And I mean, it took a few years of diving into, he got lucky because in those 12-step groups, they have sponsors, right? You get a sponsor. In Mexico, they call them godfathers or godmothers. You
Mm-hmm.
choose and the fellow that he chose turned out to be very wise, not
Yeah.
necessarily a therapist like you and me, but just wise. And
Yeah.
Saul just surrendered to following instruction, right? One of the stories he tells that I think is beautiful is that part of what they teach, or they were teaching that group, is that through service you heal. The opposite of selfishness, right? Which a lot of people with those problems tend to be so ingrained in themselves. So he would be asked to wash the floor. He hates washing floors. He's really good at cleaning. Since he was a kid, he was very good at cleaning, but he doesn't like. But he was told, and again, he tells in the book that he was quite an atheist before he started this journey. And then he's agnostic. In other words, he believes there's something, doesn't know exactly if it's God or what it is, but he believes that there's something.
Mm-hmm.
So he was told, you're going to wash this floor, imagining that God's going to walk on it after. That's how well you're going to wash it, right? So he would just scrub away, even though he did not like washing floors. And then he knew his healing was in that, in doing service, not necessarily service that you enjoy, but any kind of service, right? And so whatever he was told to do, he would do. He learned to get out of himself and
Yeah.
care about other people, and to learn how his mind works. He's also an avid student. He's very bright. So even though he does not have any degrees, his understanding of human behavior and psychology and the brain, he knows the parts of the brain better than me. So he was very curious. Why am I like this? How does this work? Right. So
Yeah.
between studying and following instruction and getting up on that podium, people come to you and me in a private office and then they spill it out. Right. In his case, it was in a public setting to many people, confessing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
His flaws, his misbehaviors, and that's one thing I think you mentioned that initially that I think is very unique about this book is that he does disclose how unwell he was, what he did, what was wrong, what most people write memoirs and they write about what happened to them, their trauma, how they healed it. Here he's telling the world, this is how unwell I was. This is how badly I behaved. This is how, I don't like the word crazy, right? But, his craziness.
Yeah.
And so to go from that, and that's what I see in him. He has such amazing humility now.
Yeah.
And no shame to actually write a book like that that's out there. People who know him might read it. Strangers maybe doesn't matter as much, right? So to me, it's such a gift he's given the world by really sharing what is it like to live in a head like that,
Yeah.
in an impulsive body like that. And then to be able to transform, and continues to this day to amaze me every time I talk to him. I'm amazed that it's been years now and he's maintained this shift.
Yeah. And I had so many thoughts going through my head while you were talking about the transformation and the steps and the things that he went through. The thing about cleaning the floors and how he was given this context to think of, imagine that you're cleaning and it's going to be God walking on it. I think this speaks of purpose. When people understand and know that what they're doing has meaning. And by the way, it doesn't have to have meaning for anybody else. It doesn't mean that it's purposeful for anybody else. It happened to be what he needed at the moment and in that time. That cleaning the floor was not just an act of humility. There was something greater in this. And when I think about what that counselor, that person that was helping him, his sponsor rather, was giving to him in the moment, whether he realized it or not, he was giving him purpose in what otherwise would have been a very menial task. So that task became greater than him. And it sounds like that's what he needed, right? Is like some of that guiding light. Give me something greater. If I had Saul in front of me now, I would ask him, did that help your brain stop trying to think? Because now, maybe in that moment, you didn't need to think, what is this for? Somebody gave it to you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it gave him a purpose. I have a daughter that struggles with pretty bad anxiety, and he said to me years and years ago, tell her to do service. Funny enough, she's like that. She's always helping people. But, another story he tells in the book that it just touched my heart. We were not raised religious in our home. My mom was sort of Catholic, but had a bad experience in the church. And so she very much believed in prayer and God. And my dad was the son of a Jewish man that didn't really raise him. So not quite Jewish. Anyways, both my parents told us that God existed, but we were not really raised in prayer or a church or.
Sure. Yeah.
My mom taught me many of the, Our Father who art in heaven. I mean, I know some of those, but anyways. So one day his sponsor asked him, so Saul, do you pray? Oh, yeah, I pray. What do you pray for? And he's like, well, I pray that God guides me and maybe, helps me be a better person. And the sponsor scolds him. Oh, so you're praying for yourself. No, you're going to go on your knees every night and you're going to pray for other people. You're going to pray for the people that really need it, the people that are hungry, the people that are suffering, the people that are ill. And he tells a story how he goes on his knees. I see this grown 50-year-old man, however old he was, on his knees, on his bed. It's a beautiful part in the book, how he describes how he just went on his knees and just said, God, please help the people that are in pain, help the people that are sick, whatever. And then he cried after that prayer. He just cried in so much. And then the next day he woke up, he never felt lonely again. Oh my gosh, right? So it's, what spirituality is that reconnecting with our love for others in some way,
Yeah.
So he just tells all these, and he describes them as miracles. He puts miracle 1 and the topic of how he learned that thing, and then miracle 2. So when I was working on the book, I looked at the definition of miracle. So there is obviously the religious, spiritual definition, God grants you this miracle. But the second definition is something that is improbable and extraordinary that comes to happen that leads to good outcomes. And that's, I said to him, that's the title of the book. Oh, he said, but isn't that seated me saying, I go, no, that is the title of the book because you're talking miracles. And the miracle was, he worked hard for those miracles. He didn't just wake up and the miracle happened, right? He worked hard and what he achieved was, the title of the book. And then we talk about the neuroscience. I don't have scans of his brain, but when you repeat over and over and over and over, these teachings that he was getting, and I guess, as I said, we don't have scans of his brain, that part of his brain was able to change enough for him to be able to maintain this shift over the long term.
Yeah. I mean, we often talk about neuroplasticity and the fact that your brain can make new decisions about how to react or how to behave through repeated behavior. I'm so glad that you brought that up because, first of all, I remember one of the things that I read in the book was about 4 principles that Saul identified as things that he followed: obedience, acts of love, humility, and being in the service of others. A lot of times people think that transformation is this one big breakthrough, but it's really built through the repeated things and the repeated behaviors of just ordinary choices. And it sounds to me like in these 4 principles: obedience, acts of love, humility, and being of service to others, doing the little things that he did, those ordinary choices, day in and day out, one way or another, was what actually led to the transformation. Those things, and I'd like for you to speak on this, because I don't want to make any assumptions, but it sounds to me like it was those things plus the accountability piece. Because taking accountability, taking responsibility, and more importantly, I think when you get to the point where you can take accountability for your behavior without collapsing into shame, and that's really hard to do. It, to me, I think that's kind of like the ultimate secret recipe in what it takes to make transformations. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that resonates, or that you feel was it part of his experience?
100%. 100%. Up till then, he was blaming my dad, blaming the
Mm,
world, blaming anybody and everything. And I mean, he had a point. I mean, my dad had a big hand at why he ended up, because, when you have a predisposition, it combines with life experience, right?
yeah.
And that's how bad it'll get. And so, yes, my dad had a lot to do with it. But when he finally, and that's what his sponsor and that group said, is like, stop blaming everybody. Right? You're
Mm-hmm.
the one that's behaving like a jerk. You take responsibility. So all those times he got up on that podium to confess how unwell he was or to talk about his trauma, not only did he not stop blaming my dad, he changed his understanding of my dad. Because my dad also had it rough growing up,
Yeah.
like really bad,
Yeah.
abuse, poverty, abandonment, you name it. And so you don't excuse behavior, but he understands that, my dad was not capable of better.
Right.
And
Right.
even though my brother deserved better. So same with my mom, right? My mom was a great mom, but again, she left us those 2 years because, she couldn't cope or whatever. So he completely took responsibility for his healing. And that's the message you and I want to give, right?
Yeah.
Terrible stuff can happen to you by other people, and they hold the blame for it because they did it, but you hold the responsibility for your change and transformation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the power is in the hands of those people. And those people could come and apologize to you. That's still not going to change. If I
Yeah.
cut you, literally cut you, and you're bleeding, and I say, I'm sorry, does the cut go away? No, it doesn't go away. It's still there, right? So people that say, oh, they just need to apologize, that's not going to make it better. You need to make it better. And
Yeah.
he did, absolutely 100%. He's complete, and that's why the book is remarkable. I don't know if you looked at that chapter where he's talking about his flaws. When I was reading it, and working on it, I was thinking, oh my God, I never looked at the list of flaws. What are my flaws? You know what I mean? Like, and for him to say, I have these flaws, they're not gone. I just have awareness and make different choices. Oh my gosh. It's like, where did you come from? Right? To have not only the awareness, but not only do you stop blaming, you see yourself in your totality and own the parts of you that can be problematic. You just learn to make different choices.
That's right.
That's why I'm in awe, because even though I've done a lot of therapy, a lot of healing, I'm a good person, I help people, blah, blah, blah. There's some things that he has done that just the way he lives by himself in this little humble little house. And that's a little house now because he used to live in a room, no luxury. He doesn't own a car, with very little means.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's content. And that to me is where you see the transformation being so remarkable.
Yeah.
It's not just that he contains the bipolar disorder, is he deepened this acceptance of life and embracing life as it is that many of us have a hard time doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-awareness doesn't really remove the challenges. I mean, let's be clear about that. What it does do, however, if you choose to look at it this way, is that it does create more opportunity for choice
Yes.
and in ways of responding. That's the greatest gift that it gives you. And so it can be a curse and a blessing. And if you can choose for it to be a blessing, then you also can choose how to respond to situations and to different people, or even the way that see people who have hurt you. And I'm not saying that you have to forgive or anything like that. That's a very personal choice. I'm just saying that you can use it to your benefit. To ask you about family support, because support obviously can help people change. It can help with creating resilience in people. But I think that sometimes family members, what they don't understand is that their support doesn't change the person. Their support cannot make decisions for them. And there's a fine line, I think, sometimes in giving support versus enabling. It's really hard to discern what to do depending on situations, right? Some people, it's just a person and their partner. It gets more complicated when there are children involved. It becomes even more complicated when mental illness is seen as a stigma that you don't address or that you repress or that you hide. When culture says that's a no-no. I mean, these are all layers on top of layers on top of layers, right? And you have the person that is the spouse sometimes becoming the caregiver. There's a lot of pressure on them and the people who love the person who is needing to deal and suffering with the disorder. But I'd love to know your thoughts on family support. What are some of the things that, in your experience, families, and this includes spouses, right, can do to help? And where are the boundaries? And again, I know that this is a very general question and it's not going to apply to everybody. But generally speaking, in your experience with bipolar disorder in particular, what are some of the things that families or family members can look at? What are some of the things that they should be asking? Maybe, can you give some guidance to the person listening who is saying, "Oh my gosh, this is me. This is us. I don't know what to do."
You said it correctly. You can't change somebody. You can't force them. You can't, right? I mean, in an ideal world, the family member or spouse or partner or whatever could find the unlimited patience,
Yes.
unlimited love, unlimited compassion. The reality is that when you've been at it for a long time and you're the supporter of that person, you end up with this thing you and I know called compassion fatigue, right? You start
Yeah.
getting, you start not feeling so compassionate. You start feeling frustrated.
And cynical. I think it comes with a level of cynicism sometimes.
And if that's you listening,
Mm-hmm.
know that is our human nature. It's very hard to care for someone who has these struggles. I would say, if possible, you want to convey that you love this person always,
Mm-hmm.
but you also need to take care of yourself. You hear that a lot. It's a bit of a cliche, but go to therapy, right? I've raised a daughter that had serious problems of anxiety, and it was a royal mess for a while there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done therapy. I've sought help. I've found mindfulness. Mindfulness saved me because I honestly felt like I wanted to jump out a window sometimes, right? It's extremely hard. And so I found mindfulness, and I learned that if she's not with me right this minute, reading a book or making a meal, and she's somewhere else in the house or she's not in the house, this is my only reality. Right here, I'm washing a dish. This is benign.
Yeah.
I'm not in the problem. I'm not in the problem. Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The Power of Now, says if you pay attention, whether it's about someone in your life that has mental illness or any other problem you think you have, if you pay attention, you'll realize that there's many moments where you're not in the problem. So to me, I would say mindfulness was life-changing for me in my journey with my daughter. And so seek help, seek support. We live in a world that when somebody has any kind of illness, not only mental illness, cancer or whatever, the focus is on them. We forget that the people around them are extremely affected by that. And so
Yeah.
those people should also be receiving care and support. But most times people don't think of that. And it is very draining to deal with someone who's struggling.
Yeah.
So for us, neither my other brother or I lived with Saul since Saul was 17, 18. So we've been able to support because we're not there day after day after day, right? Because when you're day after day after day, some days you run out of energy to support. So you can convey compassion, but you need to get help. And
Yeah.
you need to have a boundary. Where does your support end and they begin? So anything that can help you realize that even if you're caring for somebody, it's okay to say no sometimes. And it's okay to step away and get help,
Yeah.
because it's very difficult to navigate that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think about recovery, not just for the person who is going through the illness. I think there is also recovery that the family members, the people who love them, the people who are supporting them, there's recovery that needs to happen also for them if they have been, used to just being part of the cycle and not knowing how to get out of it. There's some healing and recovery that needs to happen there as well. And I just wanted to point that out because I feel like I think people need to hear that, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Recovery does not require perfection. It requires a willingness to keep recognizing patterns that come up and then making a conscientious choice to choose differently. Easier said than done. I get it. Much easier said than done. But you start small, baby steps, one little action. I want to ask you, Erika, now that I think about that and recovery, for the person listening who maybe is the person with bipolar disorder, and they're sitting here maybe listening to this episode and thinking to themselves, I've failed way too many times already. I've caused way too much damage. Where does the possibility for transformation even begin for me? For that person who's listening and in that mind space right now, can you maybe offer one small, gentle strategy that they might be able to start with?
Get up every day and choose to do 3 acts of kindness.
I love that.
3 acts of kindness, like seek them out. Because, we all do kindness every day. You hold the door open to someone that's coming into a Starbucks with you or whatever. But I think part of the struggle for people with bipolar disorder or anxiety or depression is they're self-absorbed, not in the selfish sense, but in the, there's so much pain. They're always thinking and analyzing and trying to. So if you get out of yourself and you say, I'm going to look for 3 opportunities to do kindness. You message somebody, how are you? Right?
Yeah.
Somebody or you offer a friend to go wash their floors like Saul did, right? Or you have a grandma that doesn't get a lot of visitors and you go visit. Focus on 3 acts of kindness every day and you might start feeling differently. Because we do know that kindness is transformative to mental health.
Yes.
And it might get you out of yourself. And it might make you see that you do have a place in this world that is not your mental illness.
Yeah. Oh, of all the things that you could have offered, strategies and clinical tools and all this, offering that recommendation of just doing 3 acts of kindness, it doesn't cost a dime. It gives people purpose. And I think most importantly, it gives you something to feel good about after having so many things that you feel bad about. So thank you for that. I have one more question for you, Erika. How would you define emotional wealth when you think about it in the context of what you've seen, what you've experienced, what you've witnessed with your clients, with your family situation, with your brother? How would you define emotional wealth?
I would say emotional wealth is fostering love within.
Mm.
I I mean, we can talk about emotional intelligence, being able to regulate emotion and make good choices. But I really believe if you can fill your heart with love, and I know it sounds very cliche, but I really do mean, I think spirituality, regardless of what religion or belief you have, in the end, it's a teaching of fostering love within. There was one year that every January, I don't do these, plans of losing weight, or I don't do that. I set intentions of something that I want to transform. And one year I decided to foster love in my heart. That was, me. So I'd be driving and somebody cut me off. And the first reaction is like, and then I would say, no, foster love, foster love. Maybe they're having a bad day. I send them with wishes of love and with warmth. And it transformed me.
Yeah.
Instead of holding on to. So any way that you can foster love within, acts of kindness will make you feel love for others. I think that that's the wealthiest emotional capital that we can have within.
Amazing. Erika, how do people get in touch with you? Because there's just so much more here. What would be the best way for people to learn more about you, your work, or if they want to reach out and maybe work with you?
Well, they can find me at mindfulness YVR. So YVR is the acronym for the Vancouver Airport. I live in Vancouver, Canada. So mindfulnessyvr.com is my website. And Improbable and Extraordinary. So our book has a website, improbableandextraordinary.com.
We're both holding up our copies if you're on YouTube.
Improbableandextraordinary.com. You can read more about some of the endorsements. We have, some interview questions that Saul and I answer. There's a couple of YouTube videos in there, but you can also go to YouTube, Improbable and Extraordinary, and find us there. Yeah. So if you want to get in touch, those are the best ways to find us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Erika Horwitz. Everyone, please go to the website, get this book. It is so compelling. It's just such an incredible story. And I'm really grateful to you for your transparency, for your openness, for your honesty, and most of all, for helping to normalize mental illness. And so thank you for being here today and giving us that gift of hope that you and your brother have given to the world.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. And thank you all for listening to Emotionally Wealthy. If this episode gave you insight, clarity, or perspective that you needed today, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. And if you're enjoying the show, leave a review because it really helps to find these conversations. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and stay emotionally wealthy. Oh, hey, quick reminder for you that this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnoses, or treatment. Always consult a qualified professional with any questions you might have.
Thanks to our friends at BuzzSpear for helping with post-production and distribution.